good morning, or afternoon, or evening, or whatever time you're watching this video. So today we're going to talk about the Presidents of the United States. I'm going to go through each president 1 through 46, except technically we only have 45 people who have been president. I'm going to go over name, nickname, date of birth, date of death if they have died. We're going to talk about time in office, who their vice president or vice presidents were, their political party, and if it changed over their time, what jobs they had before they became president, and an interesting fact about each president. So let's dive in. So the first president we're going to talk about today is George Washington. His nickname was the father of the country. I wonder why. So George Washington would be born February 22nd, 1732 in Pope's Creek, Virginia, and he would die December 14th, 1799 in Mount Vernon, Virginia. His time in office would be from April 30th, 1789 to March 3rd, 1797. His vice president would be John Adams. He would be part of the Independent Federalist Party. George Washington really did not like political parties. Before becoming president, he was a planter, a military officer, a statesman, and a surveyor. He actually surveyed land close to where I live. Interesting fact, Washington was the first person to sign the United States Constitution. The next person is the second president of the United States, John Adams. So, John Adams would be known as the father of American independence and the father of the American Navy. He would be born October 30th, 1735 in Quincy, Massachusetts, and he would die July 4th, 1826 in Quincy, Massachusetts. His time in office would be from March 4th, 1797 through March 3rd, 1801, and his vice president would be Thomas Jefferson. He would be part of multiple political parties. He would be part of the pro-administration party, and then the Federalist, and then the Democratic Republican Party. Before becoming president, he was a statesman, an attorney, a diplomat, and a writer. Interesting fact about John Adams. Adams died the same day as Thomas Jefferson. The third president of the United States would be Thomas Jefferson. He would be known as the father of the Declaration of Independence. He would be born April 13th, 1743 in Shadwell, Virginia, and he would die July 4th, 1826 in Charlottesville, Virginia, same day as John Adams. His time in office would be from March 4th, 1801 to March 3rd, 1809. During his presidency, he would have two vice presidents. He would have Aaron Burr for his first term and George Clinton for his second term. His political party would be the Democratic Republican Party. Before becoming president, he was also a politician and a lawyer. You're going to see a trend. A lot of these people are going to be politicians and lawyers before becoming president. Interesting fact about Thomas Jefferson is he founded University of Virginia, UVA, in 1819. The next person up is the fourth president, James Madison. So James Madison would be known as the father of the Constitution. He would be born March 16th, 1751 in Port Conway, Virginia, and he would die June 28th, 1836 in Montpelier, Virginia. His time in office would go from March 4th, 1809 to March 3rd, 1817. During his presidency, he would have two vice presidents. He would have George Clinton for his first term and Elbridge Gerry for his second term. He would be part of the Democratic Republican Party, and before becoming president, he was a politician and a military colonel. Interesting fact is James Madison would be the smallest president at just over 5'4" tall and weighing only 100 pounds. The next president is going to be James Monroe. He is the fifth president of the United States. He would be known as the Era of Good Feelings president. He would be born April 28th, 1758 in Westmoreland County, Virginia, and he would die July 4th, 1831 in New York City. His time in office was March 4th, 1817 to March 3rd, 1825. His vice president would be Daniel D. Tompkins. He would be part of the Democratic Republican Party. Before becoming president, he was a politician and a lawyer. So interesting facts about James Monroe is he also died on July 4th along with, on a different year, but was also the same dates of death as Presidents Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, who would die 5 years before him. Monroe was also the last president to never be photographed in his lifetime. So the sixth president of the United States is John Quincy Adams, known as Old Man Eloquent. His birthday would be July 11th, 1767 in Braintree, Massachusetts, and he would die February 23rd, 1848 in Washington, D.C. His time in office would be March 4th, 1825 through March 4th, 1829. His vice president would be John C. Calhoun. He would have multiple political parties over his time, over his lifetime, such as he would be a Federalist, then a Democratic Republican, then a National Republican, then an anti-Masonic, and then a Whig. Before becoming president, he was a politician and a lawyer. Interesting facts about John Quincy Adams is just a few years after he was president, he would go and serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. He would be a delegate for Massachusetts, and he is the only ex-president to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives after being president. The next president is the 7th president, Andrew Jackson. His nickname would be Old Hickory. So Jackson was born March 15th, 1767 in the Waxhaws in the Carolinas. It borders North and South Carolina. It kind of goes over the border of the states. And he would die June 8th, 1845 in Nashville, Tennessee. His time in office was March 4th, 1829 to March 4th, 1837. While he was in office, he would have two vice presidents, John C. Calhoun for his first term and Martin Van Buren for his second term. Andrew Jackson's political party was the Democratic Party. Before becoming president, he was a politician, lawyer, and military general. Fun fact about Andrew Jackson is he would beat up his own assassin. So in January of 1835, President Jackson was confronted after he left a funeral at the Capitol. The man pulled a gun and fired on Jackson, but the gun misfired. Jackson then started beating the man with his cane. The man would pull out a second pistol, fire at Jackson. It would also misfire, and eventually Jackson would have people come help him subdue this would-be assassin. The 8th president on the list is Martin Van Buren, also known as Little Van. He would be born December 5th, 1782 in Kinderhook, New York, and he would die July 24th, 1862 in Kinderhook, New York. His time in office was from March 4th, 1837 to March 4th, 1841. While in office, his vice president would be Richard Mentor Johnson. His political parties changed a few times from the Democratic Republican Party to the Democratic Party to the Free Soil Party. Before being president, he was also a politician and a lawyer. So Martin Van Buren would be the first president to be born a U.S. citizen. The 9th president on the list is William Henry Harrison, nickname Old Tippecanoe. He would be born February 9th, 1773 in Charles City County, Virginia, and he would die April 4th, 1841 in Washington, D.C. He would die from a cold that he got while he was in office. So his time in office was very short, March 4th, 1841 to April 4th, 1841. During his short 1 month as president, his vice president would be John Tyler. He would be part of the Democratic Republican Party and then move to the Whig Party. Before becoming president, he would be an Army general and a politician. The interesting fact about William Henry Harrison is he was only president for 32 days before he passed away. So the 10th president would be John Tyler. John Tyler would be known as His Accidency because he accidentally became president when William Henry Harrison died. He would be born March 29th, 1790 on Greenway Plantation in Charles City County, Virginia, and he would die January 18th, 1862 at the Ballard House in Richmond, Virginia. His time in office was April 4th, 1841 to March 4th, 1845. So John Tyler would have no vice president, and you're going to see this on multiple presidents as I talk, so let's talk about why. So when President Henry William Harrison died, John Tyler became president. At the time, though, there was no 25th Amendment, so the vacancy of the vice president's office would not be filled until the next election and inauguration. During his lifetime, John Tyler would have multiple parties, such as the Democratic Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the Whig Party, the Tyler Party, and the Independent Party. Before becoming president, he would be a lawyer and a politician. Interesting fact about John Tyler would have 15 children between his two wives. His first wife would die of a stroke. The 11th president is James K. Polk, also known as Young Hickory. He would be born November 2nd, 1795 in Pineville, North Carolina, and he would die June 15th, 1849 in Nashville, Tennessee. He would be president from March 4th, 1845 to March 4th, 1849, and you can see that he would end his presidency in March and die in June just a couple months later. His vice president would be George M. Dallas. He would be part of the Democratic political party. Before becoming president, he was a lawyer and a politician. I'm seeing a trend. Interesting fact, while Polk was president, the creation of the U.S. Postal Stamp happened and the creation of the U.S. Naval Academy happened. So the 12th president is going to be Zachary Taylor. He would be nicknamed Old Rough and Ready. He would be born November 24th, 1784 in Barboursville, Virginia, and he would die July 9th, 1850 in Washington County, Washington, D.C. from a gastrointestinal issue. It was said that for 4th of July, he ate too many cherries and milk, and it gave him some gastrointestinal problems, and it was enough that it killed him. So his time in office would be March 4th, 1849 to July 9th, 1850, just over a year. His vice president would be Millard Fillmore, and he would be part of the Whig Party. Before he became president, he was a military officer. Interesting fact, before becoming president, Taylor had never voted in a presidential election. The next president is number 13, which is Millard Fillmore, also known as the American Louis Philippi. So he would be born January 7th, 1800 in Morava, New York, and he would die March 8th, 1874 in Buffalo, New York. He would be president from July 9th, 1850 to March 4th, 1853, and he would have no vice president, such as we've already talked about, because there was no 25th Amendment. They did not have to fill the office of the vice president until the next election and inauguration. He would be part of a couple different political parties, such as the Anti-Masonic Party, the Whig Party, the Know Nothing Party, I really like the name of that party, and the Democratic Party. Before becoming president, he would be a politician and a lawyer. Interesting fact about Fillmore is he was one of the original founders of the University of New York at Buffalo. The 14th president is going to be Franklin Pierce, nicknamed Young Hickory of the Granite Hills. He would be born November 23rd, 1804 in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, and he would die October 8th, 1869 in Concord, New Hampshire. His time in office would be March 4th, 1853 to March 4th, 1857. He would have he would have one vice president, and then his vice president would die. His vice president would be William R. King, who we would have for a little over a month before he would pass away, and then he would have no vice president because there was no 25th Amendment yet. His political party was the Democratic Party, and before becoming president, he was a lawyer and a politician. Pierce was the first president, though, to put up a Christmas tree in the White House. The next president is going to be James Buchanan, number 15. His nickname was Old Public Functionary. He would be born April 23rd, 1791 in Cove Gap, Pennsylvania, and he would die June 1st, 1868 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He would be president from March 4th, 1857 to March 4th, 1861. His vice president would be John C. Breckinridge. He would be part of a couple different political parties during his time. He would be a Federalist and then a Democratic Republican before going straight to the Democratic Party. Before becoming president, he was a lawyer and politician. Buchanan was the only president who never married, so his niece, Harriet, would act as First Lady while he was in the White House, and she became really popular and got the nickname of the Democratic Queen. The next president is number 16, Abraham Lincoln, known as Honest Abe or the Great Emancipator. Abraham Lincoln would be born February 12th, 1809, near Hedgesville, Kentucky, and he would die April 15th, 1865 in Washington, D.C. He would be assassinated at Ford's Theater. So his time in office was April 4th, 1861 through April 15th, 1865. During his time as president, he would have two vice presidents, Hannibal Hamlin for his first term, and then he would have Andrew Johnson for what was the small part of his second term. He would be a part of the Whig Party before moving to the Republican Party. Before serving as president, Abraham Lincoln had multiple jobs. He was an election clerk. He was a postmaster. He was a surveyor. He was a state legislature later, a lawyer, a congressman before becoming president of the United States. I've also heard where he was a wrestler and had a pretty good wrestling record. Interesting fact that Lincoln was the first president not born in one of the original 13 states. The next president is number 17, Andrew Johnson, known as the Tennessee Tailor. He would be born December 29th, 1808 in Raleigh, North Carolina. Same birthday as me. And he would die July 31st, 1875 in Elizabethton, Tennessee. His time in office would be April 15th, 1865 to March 4th, 1869. He would not have a vice president because there was no 25th Amendment yet, and he took over after Lincoln was assassinated. He would have two political parties. He would be part of the Independent Party, and then he would be part of the Democratic Party. Before becoming president, he was a tailor and a politician. Interesting fact, Johnson would also be the first president to be impeached, but not the last. So the 18th president of the United States is Ulysses S. Grant, have the nickname Sam. He would be born April 27th, 1822 in Point Pleasant, Ohio, and he would die July 23rd, 1885 in Wilton, New York. His time in office would be March 4th, 1869 to March 4th, 1877. While in office, he would have two vice presidents. His first term, he would have, I'm going to mess up the first name, so I'm just going to go with the last name, Colfax. And then his second term, he would have Henry Wilson until Wilson died in 1875, and then he would not have a vice president for the remainder of his term. He would be part of the Republican Party. Before becoming president, Grant owned he was a leather shop clerk. He did not own the leather shop, he was a leather shop clerk. And he was commanding general of the United States Army. So an interesting fact about Ulysses S. Grant is Ulysses is not his real first name. It is Harmon. And he got the name Ulysses S. Grant due to a mistake by a benefactor on his application to West Point. So the S, such as in President Harry S. Truman's name, the S does not stand for anything. So he was Ulysses S. Grant, U.S. Grant, which gave him the name Sam, as in Uncle Sam, among his soldiers. So, Ulysses S. Grant. President 19 would be Rutherford B. Hayes, or also known as Rutherford. He would be born October 4th, 1822 in Delaware, Ohio, and he would die January 17th, 1893 in Fremont, Ohio. He would be president from March 4th, 1877 to March 4th, 1881. While being president, his vice president would be William A. Wheeler. He would be part of the Whig Party before moving to the Republican Party. Before becoming president, he was a lawyer, politician, and a brigadier general. So Hayes did not serve alcohol in the White House. His wife would serve lemonade instead, earning her the nickname Lemonade Lucy. So the 20th president is going to be James Garfield. His nickname is going to be Boatman. He's going to be born November 19th, 1831 in Moreland Hills, Ohio, and he would die September 19th, 1881 in Elberon, New Jersey. He would be assassinated while in office. So his time in office would go from March 4th, 1881 to September 19th, 1881, less than a year. He would have the vice president of Chester A. Arthur, and he would be part of the Republican Party. Before becoming president, he was a politician, a lawyer, an amateur mathematician, and a major general in the U.S. Army. So a fact about Garfield is while in office, the Star Route scandal occurred. So while President Garfield was not implicated in this scandal, it was found that many members of Congress, including those in his own party, were illegally profiting from private organizations who would purchase postal routes out west and then make people pay them extra money to get the mail delivered. So the 21st president is going to be Chester A. Arthur, also known as Elegant Arthur. He would be born October 5th, 1829 in Fairfield, Vermont, and he would die November 18th, 1886 in New York City. He would be president from September 19th, 1881, when James Garfield was assassinated, to March 4th, 1885. He would not have a vice president because, as we've talked of before, the 25th Amendment was not in place yet. He would go from the Whig Party to the Republican Party in his lifetime. Before becoming president, he was a lawyer, a civil servant, and a brigadier general. Interesting fact about Chester A. Arthur is Arthur liked to stay up late and go around for late night walks about 1 or 2, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning in Washington, D.C. So the next person, Stephen Grover Cleveland, will be the 22nd and the 24th president. His nickname will be Big Steve. He would be born March 18th, 1837 in Cladwell, New Jersey, and he would die June 24th, 1809 in Princeton, New Jersey. His time in office his first term would be March 4th, 1885 to March 4th, 1889, and then his second term would be March 4th, 1893 to March 4th, 1897. So for his first term, he would have Thomas A. Hendricks from March to November of 85, and then Hendricks would pass away, and then he would not have a vice president because of the 25th Amendment. And then in his second term, he would have Adlai Stevenson. I probably butchered the first name. Don't be mad. Don't be mean to me. His political party would be the Democratic Party. Before becoming president, he would be a lawyer and a politician. So, interesting fact about Cleveland. As you saw, he was the 22nd and 24th president. He is the only U.S. president in history to serve non-consecutive presidential terms. Moving on to the 23rd president, which would be Benjamin Harrison, known as Little Ben. He would be born August 20th, 1833 in North Bend, Ohio, and he would die March 13th, 1901 in Indianapolis, Indiana. His time in office would be March 4th, 1889 to March 4th, 1893. While president, his vice president would be Levi P. Morton. He would be part of the Whig Party before moving to the Republican Party. Before becoming president, he was a politician, a lawyer, and a colonel in the U.S. Army. So Harrison came from a very famous family. Not only was his grandfather William president, but his father was a U.S. congressman, and his great-grandfather signed the Declaration of Independence. So the next president is the 25th president, which will be William McKinley, also known as the Napoleon of Protection. He would be born January 29th, 1843 in Niles, Ohio, and he would die in September 14th, 1901 in Buffalo, New York. He would be assassinated while in office. So his time being president would go from March 4th, 1897 to September 14th, 1901. While he was his time as president, his vice president would be Garrett Hobart, who would die in 1899, and then he would not have a vice president for the remainder of that first term. And then he would get Theodore Roosevelt for his vice president from March to September of 1901 until his assassination. So he would be part of the Republican political party, and before becoming president, he was a politician, a lawyer, and a major in the U.S. Army. Interesting fact about McKinley is he would be the first president to ride in an automobile. Moving on to the 26th president, which would be Theodore Roosevelt. So Theodore Roosevelt's nicknames were TR or the Trust Buster. He would be born October 27th, 1858 in New York City, New York, and he would die January 6, 1919 in Oyster Bay, New York. He would be in office from September 14th, 1901 to March 3rd, 1919. His vice president for both terms of office would be Charles Warner Fairbanks. Theodore Roosevelt would be part of the Republican Party. Before being president, he had a lot of jobs. He was an author, a conservationist, an explorer, a historian, a nationalist. He was police commissioner. He was also a politician and a soldier. So, interesting fact about Roosevelt is he would go blind in his left eye because he was injured during a boxing match while he was president. The next president, number 27, is William Howard Taft, also known as Big Bill. He was a very large man. So Taft would be born September 15th, 1857 in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he would die March 8th, 1930 in Washington, D.C. His time in office would be for one term, March 4th, 1909 to March 4th, 1913. While in office, he would have the vice president of James S. Sherman, and then Sherman would die in office in 1912, and because of no 25th Amendment yet, he did not have to fill the vacancy. He would be part of the Republican Party. Before becoming president, Taft would be a politician, a lawyer, and a judge. Interesting fact about Taft is Taft went back to the law and finally joined the Supreme Court after being president. He would teach at Harvard Law until he was named to the Supreme Court in 1921 by President Warren Harding. The 28th president would be Woodrow Wilson, known as the Professor. He would be born December 28, 1856 in Staunton, Virginia, and he would die February 3rd, 1924 in Washington, D.C. He would be part of the Democratic Party. He would be in office from March 4th, 1913 to March 4th, 1921. While president, his vice president would be Thomas R. Marshall. Before becoming president, he was an academic and a politician. So President Wilson is the only U.S. president buried in Washington, D.C. He is buried in the sarcophagus at the Washington National Cathedral. William Howard Taft and John F. Kennedy are not buried in Washington, D.C. They are buried in Arlington, Virginia. The 29th president is going to be Warren G. Harding, also known as Winnie. So Warren G. Harding would be born November 2nd, 1865 in Blooming Grove, Ohio, and he would die August 2nd, 1932 in San Francisco, California. He would die from a sudden heart attack while in office. Harding would be part of the Republican Party. His years in office would go from March 4th, 1921 to August 2nd, 1932, just over about 2-ish years. His vice president while in office would be Calvin Coolidge. Before becoming president, he was a journalist and a politician. And fun fact about Harding is he liked to play poker and one time lost a set of White House china in a poker game. The 30th president is going to be Calvin Coolidge, nickname Silent Cal. He would be born July 4th, 1872 in Plymouth Notch, Virginia, and he would die January 5th, 1933 in Northampton, Massachusetts. He would be part of the political party, or the Republican Party would be his political party. My brain doesn't work all the time. His years in office would be August 2nd, 1923 to March 4th, 1929. So for his first term, which is because of Warren G. Harding's death, he would not have a vice president because there was no 25th Amendment. And then his second term, his vice president would be Charles G. Dawes. He would be a politician and a lawyer before becoming president. And Coolidge was the first sitting president to visit Cuba. The 31st president is going to be Herbert Hoover, known as the Great Engineer and the Great Humanitarian. He would be born August 10th, 1874 in West Branch, Iowa, and he would die October 20th, 1964 in New York City. He would be an independent before becoming a Republican. His years in office were March 4th, 1929 to March 4th, 1933. While president, his vice president would be Charles Curtis. Before becoming president, he was a mining engineer and a politician. Fact about Herbert Hoover is he wrote several books, including one titled The Ordeal of Woodrow Wilson and another one called The Principles of Mining. President 32 is going to be Franklin Delano Roosevelt, nickname FDR. He would be born January 30th, 1882 in Hyde Park, New York, and he would die April 12th, 1945 in Warm Spring, Georgia. He would have a stroke while in office, and that is how he would pass away. So his time in office was March 4th, 1933 through April 12th, 1945. He would be the only president to be elected for more than 2 terms. He would be elected for 4 terms and die during his 4th term. So while he was president, he would have a couple different vice presidents. His first and second terms, he would have Nancy Grace Garner. His third term, he would have Henry Agard Wallace. And his 4th term, he would have Harry S. Truman. Roosevelt would be part of the Democratic Party. Before becoming president, he was a politician and a lawyer. So Roosevelt was related to his wife. Eleanor Roosevelt was Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin's 5th cousin's niece. And since her father passed away, Eleanor was walked down the aisle on her wedding day in 1905 by her uncle Teddy. So the 33rd president is going to end up being Harry S. Truman, nickname Give 'em Hell Harry. He would be born May 8th, 1884 in Lamar, Missouri, and die December 26th, 1972 in Kansas City, Missouri. He would be part of the Democratic Party. He would be president from April 12th, 1945 through January 20th, 1953. So his first term, in quotations, as president, he would not have a vice president because there was no 25th Amendment. And then his second term, his vice president would be Alben W. Barkley. Before becoming president, he was a mailroom worker, a farmer, a bookkeeper, a soldier, and a politician. Fun fact about Truman is Truman authorized the first and only use of atomic bombs in warfare. Dwight D. Eisenhower is up next as the 34th president, nickname Ike. So he would be born October 14th, 1890 in Denison, Texas, and he would die March 28th, 1969 in Washington, D.C. He would be a Democrat before moving to the Republican Party. His time in office was January 20th, 1953 to January 20th, 1961, and his vice president would be Richard Nixon. Before becoming president, he was a military officer and a politician. Fun fact about Dwight D. Eisenhower is although he spent 35 years in the military and served during both world wars, he never saw a single day of active combat. The 35th president is going to be John Fitzgerald Kennedy, also known as JFK or Jack. He would be born May 29th, 1917 in Brookline, Massachusetts, and he would die November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas, Texas. He would be assassinated while in office. So his time in office would be a short, little over 2.5 years, almost 3 years, January 20th, 1961 to November 22nd, 1963. His vice president would be Lyndon B. Johnson. Kennedy would be part of the Democratic Party, and before becoming president, he was a U.S. Navy sailor and a politician. Kennedy would be the first Roman Catholic president that we had in the United States. So the 36th president is going to end up being Lyndon B. Johnson, also known as LBJ. He would be born August 27th, 1809 in Gillespie County, Texas, and he would die January 22nd, 1973 in Gillespie County, Texas. He would be a Democrat, part of the Democratic Party. He would take office November 22nd, 1963 after the assassination of JFK, and he would serve until January 20th, 1969. So his first term in office, he would not have a vice president because the 25th Amendment had not been enacted yet, but it would be during his first term as president. And then his second term, he would have Hubert Humphrey as his vice president. Before becoming president, he was a politician, a U.S. Navy sailor, and a teacher. So Johnson's wife would be nicknamed Lady Bird, giving them both the same initials, LBJ. They also named their daughters so that their daughters would also have the same initials of LBJ. So the 37th president is going to be Richard Nixon, also known as Tricky Dick. He would be born January 9th, 1913 in Yarba Linda, California. Probably said that wrong. And he would die April 22nd, 1994 in New York City, New York. He would be president from January 20th, 1969 to August 9th, 1974. His vice presidents would be Theodore Agnew, his first term and part of his second term, and then Gerald R. Ford for the remainder of what was his second term. He would be part of the Republican Party. Before president, he was a U.S. Navy sailor, an author, a lawyer, and a politician. So Nixon was once offered the position of player representative in the MLB, but he turned it down to continue politics. So the 30th president will end up being Gerald R. Ford, and we'll talk about how he ended up being president. So his nickname would be Mr. Nice Guy. He would be born July 14th, 1913 in Omaha, Nebraska, and died December 26, 2006 in Rancho Mirage, California. He would be part of his political party would be Republican. His time in office from August 6, 1974 to January 20th, 1977. As you can see, it's a weird entry date to being president. That is because Richard Nixon would resign because of the Watergate scandal and Gerald R. Ford would become president. So he would have no vice president from August to December because he had not picked one. And then Nelson Rockefeller would be his vice president from December of 74 to 77. Before becoming president, he was a politician, a U.S. Navy sailor, and a lawyer. So Ford was actually born Leslie Lynch King Jr., and Gerald Ford was his stepfather's name and the one that he would eventually take when he was around 20 years old. So the 39th president will end up being James Earl Carter, known as Jimmy. Jimmy would be born October 1st, 1924 in Plains, Georgia, and Jimmy Carter is still alive today. He's pushing 100. His time in office would be January 20th, 1977 to January 20th, 1981. While president, his vice president would be Walter Mondale. His political party was the Democratic Party. Before becoming president, he was a U.S. Navy nuclear submarine engineer, a farmer, and a politician. And Jimmy Carter would be the first U.S. president born in a hospital. So the next president is going to be the 40th president, Ronald Reagan, also known as the Great Communicator. He would be born February 6, 1911 in Tampico, Illinois, and died June 5th, 2004 in Los Angeles, California. He would be president from January 20th, 1981 to January 20th, 1989, and his vice president would be George H.W. Bush. He would be part of the Democratic Party before switching to the Republican Party. Before becoming president, he was an actor, a politician, a sports broadcaster, and a union leader. A fun fact about Ronald Reagan is he would be shot by an assassin in 1981, and he joked that, "I forgot to duck." The 41st president is going to be George H.W. Bush, also nicknamed Bush Sr. a little bit later on in life. He would be born June 12th, 1924 in Milton, Massachusetts, and he would die November 30th, 2018 in Houston, Texas, and he would be part of the Republican Party. He would be president from January 20th, 1989 to January 20th, 1993. So we are now time where I am alive. His vice president would be Dan Quayle. Before becoming president, he was a businessman, a diplomat, a politician, and he was a U.S. naval aviator. Fun fact, in 1992, during a state dinner in Japan, he would fall ill with the flu and vomit all over the Japanese prime minister's lap. The 42nd president is going to be William Jefferson Clinton, also known as Bill Clinton, the Comeback Kid, and Bubba. He would be born August 19th, 1946 in Hopewell, Arkansas. His time in office would go from January 20th, 1993 to January 20th, 2001, and his vice president would be Albert Al Gore. His political party would be the Democratic Party. Before becoming president, he was a lawyer and politician. Interesting fact, when Bill Clinton eats an apple, he eats the whole thing, the core, the stem, the seeds. His favorite college professor insisted that the minerals in the core were good for you. President 43 is going to be George Walker Bush, nickname Jr. He would be born July 6, 1946 in New Haven, Connecticut, and he is still alive today. His time in office would be January 20th, 2001 to January 20th, 2009. His vice president would be Richard Dick Cheney, and he would be part of the Republican Party. Before becoming president, he was a U.S. Air Force pilot, a businessman, and a politician. Interesting fact, Bush loved to run so much that he kept a treadmill on Air Force One to exercise during flights. The 44th president is going to be Barack Hussein Obama, also nicknamed Barry. He would be born August 4th, 1961 in Honolulu, Hawaii. His time in office would be January 20th, 2009 to January 20th, 2017. His vice president would be Joseph R. Biden. He would be part of the Democratic Party. Before becoming president, he would be a lawyer and a politician. Interesting fact, Obama was sworn into office using the same Bible Abraham Lincoln used 148 years earlier. So the 45th president of the United States would be Donald John Trump, also known as the Donald. He would be born June 14th, 1946 in Queens, New York. His time in office would be January 20th, 2017 to January 20th, 2021, and his vice president would be Mike Pence. He would be part of the Democratic Party before moving to Independent and then eventually moving to the Republican Party. Before being president, he was a businessman and a media personality. Interesting fact, Donald Trump's wife Melania is from Slovenia, and she is the first foreign-born First Lady since Louise Adams, who married John Quincy Adams. And finally, to the 46th president, the current president, Joseph Robinette Biden, also known as Joe or Amtrak Joe. Joe Biden would be born November 20th, 1942 in Staunton, Pennsylvania. His time in office started January 20th, 2021, and he is currently still the president. His vice president would be and is Kamala Harris, and he would be part of the Democratic Party. Before becoming president, he was a politician and a lawyer. An interesting fact is Biden is the second Catholic president in U.S. history after John F. Kennedy. If you enjoyed today's video and you want to see more videos like this one, please like, subscribe, and comment below with something that you learned today.